Hey, everybody, welcome back to the KPC podcast. My name is Karsan Turner.
And I'm Hanna Thurman.
And we have a lot that we're going to be discussing today, from Brett Kavanaugh to women representation in the Senate. We're also going to be going over the New York Times op-ed and some stuff about Alex Jones. But let's go ahead and start off with Brett Kavanaugh. And Hanna is going to really just talk about the history of hearings and why we have them.
Right.
Because I don't really know about that. So
Yeah, so because the Kavanaugh hearing has been so publicized and there's all this kind of drama going on around it, I read an article that really kind of looked at confirmation hearings from the past. And what was interesting to me was that it hasn't always been this way. In the Constitution, it actually says that it doesn't say that nominees must testify at their hearings or that a hearing actually needs to take place. The Senate can just vote on these people, but they don't. And throughout history, there has been reasons why this has happened. So one of the first hearings that was open to the public took place in 1916. And that was over a nominee that Woodrow Wilson nominated, and his name was, oh boy, I might butcher this, Louis Brandeis. And he was prompted both by anti-Semitism and his reputation for a people's lawyer and his public interest work. And so he refused to testify, and the committee deliberated for 4 months, and he was eventually confirmed. So then there was all these other allegations with future nominees, and that was in like 1922 and 1925, and it still wasn't every time that someone was nominated, it wasn't like they were getting a hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But so there was a Supreme Court Justice, Hugo Black, who was nominated by FDR, and so they deliberated. The Senate just deliberated on him. There were no public hearings on this on this nomination, and then a month or so after he was confirmed by the Senate, news broke that he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. President Roosevelt said he had no idea about this, he didn't know, which surprised me that FDR had nominated him. I'm assuming he didn't know.
It's like whenever you apply for a job and they do a background check, he just kind of glossed over that.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's I don't know how you'd really miss that. But so that happened, and there was a lot of controversy over that and concern. And so after that, that's when people started saying, okay, we need to have hearings for this. We don't want this to happen again. Mm-hmm. So in 1955 was when they started, or confirmation hearings have been a key part of this process. So they really haven't been, 1955 seems like it was a long time ago, but it really wasn't. How many Supreme Court justices nominees have we had hearings on since then? Because it's a life term unless they retire or they die. So
yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because I feel like so the reason we Supreme Court justices need hearings is so we find out that they're not actually in the KKK. Mm-hmm. But I feel like with Kavanaugh, the opposers really, really want him to be in the KKK, because they're trying so hard. From the beginning, there were protests, and as you said, over 60 people were arrested because they were just outright screaming. Linda Sarsour, professional lawbreaker, was arrested there too, which no surprise there. And what else? I have my list of specifics I was going to get into, but I feel like there were some noteworthy. It was really just people interrupting. And at the beginning, I remember at the beginning of the hearing, I don't remember what her name is, but she was interrupting the guy who was starting to ask the questions. It's from the get-go, it was just a crap show. And
and it's a public court. They can't, 20 people, in the newscast we had said 20 people can sit in the back rows. Yeah. And they can't say, since it is a public court, they can't just be we're not allowing the public in, no matter how intense it gets and how distracting it is. But they can't do anything about it, really.
That's true. They can just take them out whenever they're
right, and that's what they've been doing.
Yeah.
And then new people come in, and it's just this repeated process. Yeah.
When are they going to run out? I did see a tweet somewhere where someone said that a couple of the protesters were paid to go in and do that, but I
wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know too much about that, but so specifically, one thing I did want to talk about is I don't remember what her name is, but basically a girl who was sitting behind Kavanaugh was doing the OK hand symbol, and journalists were eating this up, saying that she was like dog whistling to white nationalists, saying like, he's our guy because look at me. And the girl is like not even white, so like why would she do a white nationalist hand symbol? But the funny thing about it is, from the ADL, they even report that like the OK hand symbol, not a white nationalist hand symbol, it's actually like a prank that originated from 4chan, which is where a lot of internet pranks originate from. And they basically made a post saying like, we need to start telling people that like this means white nationalism, so then people will freak out over it, because like even there's like an emoji for it, you know. So they like made a bunch of fake photos saying like, if you see this,
this is
what Nazis do. And it just blows my mind that like the Washington Post and I think Vox just ate this up and were running headlines saying that Brett Kavanaugh and the lady behind him were both white nationalists. And it's like they've tried so hard to paint him as this terrible person, and they just end up making themselves look so dumb in the process. And even another thing that we talked about, and I know you're going to talk about it in the news show, but Fred Guttenberg, one of the parents who lost their child in the Parkland shooting, he went up and tried to talk to Brett Kavanaugh, which he wasn't even really supposed to do that. You can't like interrupt like that. But there's a clip of him walking up to Kavanaugh as Kavanaugh is leaving to go on his lunch break, and he says like, "My name is Fred Guttenberg," and there's this like iconic picture of like Kavanaugh looking at him like, "Who are you?" And he's like reaching his hand out. But if you've been sitting there being asked questions for like 3.5 hours, and you stand up and a random guy, because I don't think Kavanaugh knows specifically who this guy is. All he hears is the guy say who his name is, and then he's like, well, I have to go, so he walks away. But people were trying to use that as a way to say that Kavanaugh's evil, he is pro-dead children and stuff like that. I don't know, just like really nasty tactics to try to smear him as this terrible person. And I feel like the last person you want to be mean to is a guy who like weighs in on, you know, like legislation and stuff like that.
Well, it has become so polarized. Like, I have oh my God, I can't speak. The hearings were lasting like 13 hours. And as you had said, he doesn't know who this person is. And what we had mentioned earlier was that these people, the 20 people that are in the back, and they're screaming and have signs and dressed up with shirts saying, you know, like, I'm what's at stake. Yeah. I'm sure his first initial reaction and thought was, this man is one of those protesters.
Yeah.
And you don't know. I mean, he's in a very tough spot here, and I mean, I didn't know that was.
Yeah.
If you had just said the name to me, I'm not gonna know. I mean, if he had said like, oh, I'm like, if he had caught him outside the courtroom and had said like, I'm a father of, you know, where he had time to talk and everything, I think it would have been a lot different. But as James and I had been looking at the pictures, and we were like, this, we don't
Totally
know.
set
Yeah,
up.
we were like, we don't really know what happened, because at the
Yeah.
when you just look at the pictures, you're not really seeing the story of behind it, the before and after. You're just, and if you see the headline, you know, Parkland shooter, Kavanaugh ignores him, you're like, oh my God, so you're immediately think
terrible
he
guy.
knew that that's who it was, when he really didn't. I'm sure he didn't, because if he just introduced himself. But
even if he did, it's not like he could have stopped the whole process and be like, oh, let me talk to you for a little bit. You know, he had to leave. I mean, Secret Service or the security guy walked in front of him and was like, all right, you got to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like really petty attempts to make him look terrible. And I feel like a lot of left-wing news outlets have been cranking it into high gear, especially because, you know, the midterm elections are coming up. But it's like they are just making themselves look so dumb, and it just like,
well, it's very frustrating for me, because I view the Supreme Court as one of, like, they're so important to this country as a whole. And I have a quote from the Chief Justice, John Roberts, and he said, I have no platform. Judges are not politicians who can promise to do certain things in exchange for votes. Judges are like umpires. Umpires don't make the rules, they apply them. Their job as a Supreme Court justice is to look at the Constitution and say, okay, this is what this law is saying. They look at precedents, they look at all the cases, and they respect that. They're not, I mean, the hearings have become so polarized. Like, I don't like that President Trump has gotten to pick two nominees, but I respect and trust the judge as a whole. Like, these emails that have been coming out, I had read them, and I was so, you know, like, because Senator Cory Booker was saying he's planning to release a document that was committee confidential, and the release would violate Senate rules. He could get outs from Senate and like lose his job over this. But he was like, I'm going to do it because it's important. And it's from 2003 talking about how the court he doesn't think that the court views Roe v. Wade as a for sure precedent, like it's set in stone. And he was like, yeah, maybe it could be overturned. I think a lot of the Supreme Court justices that were on the court at the time would overturn it.
Yeah.
This is in 2003. And we had been saying like, that time is so different. You know, people's opinions change and everything.
And it's not like this isn't something we haven't heard before. Whenever Kavanaugh was first selected, everyone was talking about the possibility of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So the fact that this leaked document that exposes everything, all these leaked documents and all these stories, they basically tell the same thing that we already knew. And we'll get into that a little bit more with the New York Times op-ed that is going to be very fun to talk about. But you have another story about women representation in the Senate.
Yeah, I do. So more women are running for Senate than ever before, but it's still, if you look at the numbers, there's still kind of not enough representation. I have some numbers here that I will pull up. Okay, so in 2018, 107 women hold seats in the United States Congress, which is about 20%. And I like to keep in mind that women do make up almost like a little bit over half of our population. So 23 women serve in the U.S. Senate and 84 women serve in the House of Representatives. And so those are just some quick numbers to look at. And people, I think there's 72 or 23 women today are senators. And okay, I'm not quite sure where my numbers are. Oh, in 2016, 40 women ran for the Senate. So I'm actually taking a women in politics class right now, and we've been really like talking about this and looking at campaigns and how people vote and how women run campaigns. And it's been super interesting because one of the articles that we read focused on if women hone into their stereotypes and if men hone into theirs, because people view women as they're going to cover the softer, compassionate ideas like healthcare and education and women's rights, whereas men, they see them as tough, and so they're going to be good with economics and foreign policy. And women run and they're like, okay, I can do economics, I can do foreign policy. But a lot of the times, most of the time, they'll still run these campaign ads that say, like in their ads, they say compassionate like 3 times more than men, and men will say toughness. Like they're tough on this, they're tough on that. So we were talking and saying like, okay, well, how can we change this? Like we don't like that we have these stereotypes, but when you're running, you kind of use those. So I think it's interesting, especially since there's a lot of women running right now and running against each other for spots in Senate and Congress or the House. And so I'm really excited to see where that ends because there's, like I said, there's more women running for Senate now, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, it's interesting a lot of the times when I hear those numbers that, they make up over half the population, but, only 23% of them are in, I often think it might have to do with just maybe women aren't as interested in politics as men are. And if we kind of like force a bunch of women into politics, there's a fear that maybe they're not as experienced as the 23% of women. So then it's like they could, be given a bad rep where, you know what I mean, where they try to even out the playing field. So say that the population's 55% women, 45% men. So they made an attempt to even that out. So they're like, okay, well, you've been a judge for a couple of years, but we're going to go ahead and like put you in the Senate because we want to equal out the playing field.
Well, they would still have to run. Like you can't just like pick and choose. But in the book for this class, there was I don't think I'll ever forget this, but it said that there wasn't a woman bathroom in the Congress building until 1993.
Oh, really? 1993?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And I mean, the first person was elected in like 1916, I think, to this. So someone from Montana was elected to the Congress first, and then someone was elected from Georgia to the Senate, and I think that was like 1925. So I mean, there were women that had been in Congress for a while.
They just had to use the boys'
Yeah,
bathroom.
and so I mean, I think it's I mean, that's definitely an argument. Like women aren't interested in politics, but I think that's because women don't see women as presidents. You know, they don't, if they don't see, I forgot what the theory is, but if you don't see someone like in that spot, you don't really think that you're capable of doing it. So I think it's still, we need those women that are going to be, you know, pushing for that. Like, look at me, I'm doing this, like, I can do this. Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, like someone like that, that's been so important to like young girls. Like we need more women like that. And I think once other young girls see that, like, that's, oh, I can do that, like I can be that, I think that'll be, I mean, but it's going to take years until we see I don't even know if we'll see full representation for a long time, but we're growing, I think, and that's good.
That's a good thing too, and it seems to be pushing more in a way that is genuine interest and not just something that's, you know, I guess forced, but yeah, so there's the representation. Now, the next thing we'll be talking about is the New York Times op-ed, and I'll probably be discussing kind of like, I kind of alluded to this earlier, the broader idea of mainstream media outlets kind of telling their own story that they want to hear. So they pull out this piece, this anonymous piece from the New York Times, which is like, it's such a, I don't know, it's so stupid. So it says this, it goes, "I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration. And my Evernote copy and pasted twice. So it just says, "I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration," which sounds like like Star Wars script. It's like some nerd wrote this up. Like, this is so fake. It's not even real. It's an anonymous source, which is funny because, you know, one of the first things we learned in my journalism 415 class is never use anonymous sources because they're not credible. And the New York Times, like, people on the like far right have this kind of, there's like this conspiracy theory going on that there's a White House insider who leaks all this information and his name is like QAnon or whatever. And so the New York Times ran an article talking about it, and they're like, "That's just a conspiracy theory. That's so stupid." And then someone writes this op-ed anonymously. They're like, "Oh, anonymous source inside the White House leaking information that we want to hear?" Yeah, it's like, no, both of these are stupid. And this is just like fake role-playing LARPing that's going on these websites, but we're told it's news, and it's like, I don't know, it hurts my head to even think about, like...
this op-ed has been everywhere. I read it, I think, on Wednesday. I just kind of briefly went over it. And I think this op-ed isn't very, I mean, it doesn't really say anything. Just kind of says, it talks about this person
People
not
don't like
liking
Donald
Trump.
Did you know that?
And I think that the Woodward book that has come out from the Watergate reporter called Fear Trump in the White House, I think that book has like way more substance to it rather than this op-ed. Like people are freaking out about this anonymous op-ed, which in the book there's like names for these people, which I think like James Mattis, or is that Mattis? I don't know. Is his first name James? I'm not quite sure.
I have no idea.
I might be wrong on that. And then like another person in the administration had come out with statements saying that like that's not what I said. So I think that the op-ed is kind of just like, oh, okay.
Fluff. Well, I mean, the Woodward book to me kind of, it reminds me of like the Fire and Fury thing. It's like a lot of it is expanded truth to kind of generate drama and interest. And there's this trend of people who have confidential information who, instead of talking about the confidential information, they just write a book instead. So it's like, so do you have information or do you just want to cash in because like you're on the spotlight? And every single time it's really been the latter. And I had something, okay, so yeah, like in the Woodward book, something that I noticed about some, I don't want to say fake news, but news that is not entirely accurate and definitely skewed to fit one form, like one political viewpoint. But like in the book, apparently Donald Trump called, was it Jeff Sessions? Like mentally retarded, and Trump said, "I never used that word inside the White House."
And he called him a dumb Southerner. Don't forget that.
Oh yeah, and a dumb Southerner. But Trump loves the South, is what he said in that tweet.
Southerners aren't dumb, he said.
But it's interesting because The Hill, they were instantly jumping on the story saying 14 years ago, Trump was on Howard Stern, and he said the word retarded twice, and so he's lying. And it's like, I like how they are so quick to like dig through years of Trump footage to find these clips of him saying the word retarded, where like the FBI, this was in June, there were leaked text messages where the FBI were literally calling Trump supporters retards. So it's like they didn't cover that at all, by the way. A few news outlets covered
Yeah,
that.
because I
and it was-
hadn't. Well, you told me this,
Yeah.
and I was like, I've never
So
heard
it's
of
like, I don't want to get into conspiracy territory, but I'm going to get into conspiracy territory
Love good
whenever I say
conspiracy.
that a lot of news outlets, they control the information that you can and can't see. And you know, whenever Trump first got into office and he was like, all this news, fake news, and I was like, well, he's calling it fake news because it's stuff that's anti-him.
Mhm.
But whenever I look at something like this, where the mainstream media is much more quick to write an article that makes Trump look stupid than they are to actually tell what's been happening. I mean, this FBI leaked text message conversation is much more important, but no outlets covered it. I mean, a couple outlets covered it, but nothing from CNN. I don't even think Fox covered it. And yeah, it's like totally one-sided. And it's like I'm starting to kind of believe that when Trump says that, like, the media tells a lot of lies, I see it a lot in a lot of the coverage and what they just choose to show and not show. And I think the Woodward book kind of drew some light to that. But it'll be interesting to see what's in the actual book too. I'm excited to read that.
Yeah,
So.
I think that we're gonna buy that. It comes out to the general public on the 11th.
No sponsorships. They're not sending it to us, unfortunately.
But we're gonna read it. We'll probably pick over it.
Yeah, and
talk
I
about it.
was gonna say I have another thing too to kind of expand on the whole. Media has a specific narrative that they follow. I mean, if you look at like big social media corporations, they always say like we have no political bias, but we're going to ban Alex Jones from every single platform. And they don't even give credible reasons as to why they banned him. They said he violated hate speech laws. So he says, okay, show me the clips where I violated hate speech laws, please. And then they go, oh, no, we're not going to do that. And then a lot of YouTube commentators were talking about the ban, and they were getting their live streams shut down. So it's like YouTubers were violating hate speech laws because they were talking about somebody else, covering the news. So it's like they were covering the wrong form of news, according to these social media outlets, and so they were censored, and then they were banned. And Twitter even, they suspended and banned the founder of Vice, Gavin McInnes. It was before the Unite the Right 2 rally, and Gavin McInnes is like a very big conservative, but he tweeted, he said, do not go to this rally, like this is bad news, don't show up. And he was banned from Twitter from that because he was inciting violence by telling people not to go. And he wasn't even one of the people who went to Charlottesville the first time and then was like, oh, this was a bad idea. The first time at Charlottesville, he said, don't go to this rally. It's bad news. Anyone who follows me or supports me, you can't go. But yeah, he was banned for telling people not to go to Charlottesville. And so it kind of makes you think when Twitter will verify somebody, like New York Times writer Sarah Jong, who released a bunch of tweets that were like, I hate white people, can we kill white people? She gets verified when people find out she tweets certain things. But when other people say, oh, don't go to Charlottesville, and then they're banned for it, it kind of makes you wonder, do these people have, you know, some agenda behind them? I don't know. I wouldn't ask questions like that, though, because you know, I believe everything that I see from Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg because they're good people. So
I'm sorry, I'm like on his website, so I'm looking at like
Infowars?
all yeah. It's
he's-
like all on like being banned. And
yeah.
it's very
there's no
dramatic.
denying that Alex Jones is a very crazy character, but he's never done anything. He's never like physically attacked anybody, which is why he was banned from Twitter. It was inciting violence. He has no charges of like domestic abuse towards anybody, and he's a crazy guy too. He screams all the time, and like he's not afraid to like run after some guy. Like poured coffee on him while he was walking down the street, and he like sprinted after him and was like, "Why would you do that? Like you don't even have an argument, you dummy!" Like, and he didn't even like beat him up or anything. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how like where these big tech companies are going, and there's also this conspiracy that it's going to be momentarily, like they're only going to be shutting these people down for a brief period of time, and then after the midterm elections, depending on who wins, they'll unban them. But even then, it's like the fact that these people have so much control over who can and can't have a voice, especially nowadays. Everyone has social media, because a lot of people will say, well, you know, they're a private company, they can do whatever they want. But it's like, whenever I think of private company, I think of like a baker down the street. I don't think of Twitter, where there's over like 1 billion people on Twitter. It's like, I don't know, it brings an interesting conversation, because do you want the government to allow people to have Twitter accounts, but it's like anytime the government could interfere with something like that, that's a big problem. So yeah, I don't know. There's just like, there's so many layers to it. You could talk about it for like 3 days.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about Alex Jones to
So
add anything.
But we do have some lighter news that we're going to end the show on, which is Nike and the Colin Kaepernick ad. Basically, they released an ad talking about, it was just Colin Kaepernick, and it was like, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, which, from what I understand, I'm not a football guy, but Colin Kaepernick was really good, and then he was really, really bad. So I feel like he's like, crap, I need to cash in, so I'm going to like start kneeling for the anthem and like cash in on this like political agenda. And so we started doing it. Then everyone was like freaking out, like, don't kneel. The president is against kneeling for the anthem, which I can't really blame him for. I mean, if he's the president of the United States, why would he not be against someone not doing the national anthem, you know? But I was thinking about this, like, if you're in the National Football League, why is standing for the national anthem like so weird? And it's like, if it was a big problem to him, why isn't he using his millions of dollars to like start an organization and like run campaigns, you know?
I think sometimes you have to like take an actual action to do. Like, he kind of started this whole idea of taking a knee because, I mean, he was fighting police brutality. That's why he's doing this. It's not because like he got bad at football and needed attention. Like, he wants to make a point. And I think I see on Twitter all the time, like, people will quote retweet something and be like, you know, like, I'm a veteran and I fight for people's right to do this. And I think that so many people like just look at him taking a knee and say that that's so disrespectful. But I think the first time that he did it, he just sat on the bench and then he changed to kneeling.
Yeah.
But I respect his decision. I think that like obviously he brought so much attention to it, like, because people are still so upset about this, and I don't think people would notice, like the people that are burning Nike shoes, I don't think they would have noticed why he is opening these organizations and like calling attention to police brutality, because they're not going to pay attention to that because they don't want to. But something that like directly goes in, like, they want to watch football. That's why they get so mad. They're like, why are you bringing politics into football? Let me watch the game. They're getting mad. Like, they have to pay attention to it now. And it's all around them. So they have to like, they refuse to think about it, but I think it's a lot more.
Well, I also know something that was, I think the solution that the NFL kind of came to, which was, if you don't want to stand for the anthem, you can wait in the locker room, so I guess, you know, in the beginning, you could say that, his kneeling, you know, shed light on an issue that needed to be talked about. And but what's interesting is, like, the U.S. Army, they basically like pay, it's like a sponsorship to do the national anthem. So they're paying the NFL to make sure that they broadcast the national anthem. So that's like if like Dollar Shave Club said, hey, we're going to sponsor this podcast, you have to like read from this script. But I go, I'm just not going to read from the script. And then they'd be like, dude, we paid you thousands of dollars to do this, and then you're like not doing it. So that's why a lot of people were upset about it. Well, of course, obviously, like kneeling for the national anthem, but another whole argument that was to be made was they're paying money, it's like an ad, and they're not running the ad, and that's why it was really problematic. So now I don't even think the U.S. Army like sponsors the NFL anymore, like pays in because of all the controversy around it. But I think the burning the Nike shoes thing is so stupid. Like, I also don't know why.
It's so stupid.
It's
like, what are you like? Ooh, like Nike makes so much money. Like, they already have your money.
Yeah.
Like,
since when are we surprised that like a huge corporation is all of a sudden getting political, and it's like
that's
that
the world we
happens all
live
the
in.
time.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't know. I have Nike shoes. I'm not gonna set these on fire, and I'm probably the next time I go get shoes, I'm not even gonna remember about this whole campaign. So I'll probably just keep buying Nike shoes. But
yeah. Well, and if you look at the actual ad, I think the thing that's kind of frustrating for me is I watched the ad, and Colin Kaepernick, he is a voiceover the whole ad, but you don't see him until the last like probably 10, 15 seconds. And this ad has all these athletes that have some sort of obstacle that they're facing. You know, like this skateboarder that doesn't know how to, okay, that's not really an obstacle, but he like gets better, or like there's a young boy that is wrestling and he is a paraplegic, he doesn't have legs, but he's wrestling someone that does. And you know, there's all these like cool things that come into this ad, and Serena Williams is in it saying, you know, like a girl from Compton who can't, like, isn't supposed to be good with sports or like really like make it out into the world, is now the best female athlete in the world. So it has, I mean, like, I think the ad is beautiful. I think it's produced really well and it has this really great message, but the only thing that people want to focus on is Colin Kaepernick and how they're supporting him.
Yeah.
But the ad has such a bigger meaning to it, and I don't think people are seeing that. And it's not just him that they're supporting, like it is Serena Williams and it is all these other athletes that have these obstacles, you know, like the whole message is to do, like, it says, like, if you have a dream and people are saying it's crazy, that's good, you know. Don't just be the best athlete in your town or the best player on the team in college, like be the best athlete in the world, be the fastest person in the world. Like, it has this great message, and people are just like, oh, Colin Kaepernick.
Also, a lot of people say like things that aren't political getting political, which I think is very true. Like the Grammys, I don't watch award shows anymore because it, you know, someone goes up and gets an Oscar, they're like, hey, thanks for this Oscar, but real quick, I don't like Donald Trump. And then it's like,
well, that's usually like the opening script for like every person that's opened. Like it's usually a comedian that opens for an award show, and that's always, they always make a comment about like the Me Too movement or Donald Trump or.
And I think that's the biggest critique people have, is just the fact that politics in general are being,
they're everywhere now.
It's a shoe company. It's not a political ad campaign. But I mean, I like the message of you can do what you want as long as you put work into it. But I understand when people get frustrated when a political movement behind it, whether they agree or disagree with it, it's just everything has to now take a political stand. And it's kind of, I wish it didn't have to be that way, but, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this is also how change comes.
Yeah, I mean, culture is a direct response from like politics itself, and I do feel like, especially within the past couple of years, it's like everyone's been politicized about everything, so it's only natural that our culture responds to that too. So I agree with that, but I feel like I had something else to say, but I forgot. And the last thing we had in the script was talking about the Woodward book, but we've already like talked about that. So we're gonna try to do some KPC book club, which so today's the 7th, so it will be out, and we will have just like some of it kind of.
Well, hopefully it depends on how fast we get in the mail.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I don't have Amazon Prime, but I might go.
I think one of my friends does that. I can.
Oh, okay.
Can get it from.
We could get it soon, and I also think they give you a PDF of it like before it comes out too, or something like that. But also another book I do need to get. I have so many books I need to read. I know Ann Coulter wrote a new book, and it's like really short too, so I need to talk about that because she's a political figure, independent woman, very controversial independent woman, but. No, I do like Ann Coulter. She's funny. But, yeah, there we go. That's all we have for today's episode. We weren't here last week. This is a much longer episode, but, you know, we're making up for last week. So there you go. If you enjoyed the video, I don't know. What camera am I looking at?
I'll
look
even
at this one. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we need 100 subscribers so we can change our URL. Because we have like a bunch of random characters and numbers. So if we get 100 subscribers, we can change the URL to something like KPC News, and then we could live stream, and that would be a really big help to us. So yeah, share this video with everybody you know. Other than that, I am Karsan Turner.
I'm Hanna Thurman.
And goodbye.
Goodbye.